Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and discussing again lengthening cycles and diminishing returns. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Also, remember to check out the sale on the premium list if you want to lock in the lower rate. That's going to end this week. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, before we really get into the theory again, and you guys know this is the same theory I've been talking about for years, I also want to say that there's a lot of theories out there for Bitcoin, and I think a lot of people have this mentality of, you're either in one camp or the other, and it's like us against them. I don't think that's really true. I think a lot of us just want to see the price of Bitcoin go up, and we have different theories on how it's going to go up. But at the end of the day, if Bitcoin does go up, whether it goes up this year, next year, or the year after, it would benefit most of us regardless of exactly when it goes up, okay? So this is just the theory that I think will play out, but I certainly respect other theories as well. So let's make sure that's clear before we dive in. So with the Bitcoin market cycle ROI, the first chart here, again, it's measured from market cycle bottom. And the idea that for the last several months was, okay, we're ahead of schedule. Therefore, some have speculated that, well, maybe we aren't going to see diminishing returns. My contention has always been, well, at one point we were ahead of cycle 2 as measured from market cycle bottom, but we were ultimately not able to keep pace with it. And the same thing with cycle 4, we were ahead of cycle 3 a little bit later, but I didn't think we were going to keep pace with it. Now, you might say, well, if you match these up, we were actually around this same ROI during the last cycle. And I think this is a key point that we need to continue to have an open mind on. Now, for us to continue to follow the last market cycle, Bitcoin would need to go up to around $300,000 by the end of the year. Because of the market capitalization and how hard it is to push the price to these higher levels, basically the higher the market capitalization, the harder it is to move the price. So with smaller cryptocurrencies like microcaps, this is why a lot of people like to speculate on microcap cryptocurrencies, because if you pick the right one, you can make a lot of money because it takes relatively little volume to move the market capitalization. For Bitcoin, it takes a lot more volume, and each cycle it's going to get harder and harder to push it up the curve. And the reason, again, is because the market capitalization is growing. It takes exponentially more volume to grow the price. It takes exponentially more volume. You might say, well, again, we have institutions. Yeah, but I always speculated that we needed institutions to go to $100,000 Bitcoin in the first place, right? This is the volume that's needed to get us there. Again, this is the cycle of institutions, and I've always been skeptical that every institution known to man is going to FOMO into Bitcoin in 2021. We're all going to sell in 2022 and come back in a couple of years. I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think a lot of institutions will continue to pour in, and this cycle is going to be somewhat different from any other cycle we've seen. We've made a lot of comparisons to the 2013 cycle. I do think it's similar to the 2013 cycle, but elongated significantly. I think the main thing is that the time between various moves has changed in this current cycle compared to the one back in 2013. So it takes a lot longer for each move this cycle compared to 2013. So in fact, we have come back down to ROIs lower than the last market cycle. A few more weeks, it's going to be pretty apparent. Are we able to keep pace or not? I mean, in order for us to have a hope of keeping pace, Bitcoin needs to have a pretty quick recovery and start shooting up within the next few months. Otherwise, there's really no chance that it's going to keep pace with cycle 3, which again, I don't think it's going to keep pace with cycle 3. I really don't think it will keep pace with cycle 3. So I've always said, why can't we have a longer cycle? I mean, if you look at from one cycle, from this first cycle to the second, you note that it not only had a diminished return, okay, this was about a modest 700x, this was about 500x, but it also took longer. This one peaked at around 250 days or so. Maybe this one was closer to 750. And then again, the following cycle, it took longer to reach a market cycle peak. And again, the returns were diminished again, okay? It went up over 100x. So we note that so far, if we were to dubiously extrapolate, we would expect diminishing returns and lengthening cycles, okay? Now, the first thing that someone might ask is, well, could this be the market cycle peak? Well, I mean, anything's possible. Of course, anything's possible. I don't believe it's the market cycle peak. I mean, I believe we could have several months where we're not putting in new all-time highs, where prices could go lower than they are today. They could go into the 20,000s for sure. I think that's possible. But I also think that we are in for another leg later on in the market cycle, similar to 2019. I mean, 2019 we had a move up, and then we had a brief bear market. Okay, maybe 6 months or so, followed by another move up, and you can see we've entered into another period where we're moving down. I think that we're going to have a similar type of outlook as we did in 2019, where we're either gonna go down or sideways for a little while. We're going to have this consolidation phase, and then we're going to continue the next leg of our journey, and this will just be another stepping stone for us to get there. That's ultimately what I see playing out. Now, lengthening cycles and diminishing returns gets a lot of flack. Okay, when I first started presenting this theory in 2019, a lot of people don't really like the theory because the idea that you have to wait longer than 2021 for Bitcoin to go to whatever the market cycle peak is not going to be a theory that a lot of people like, because they want to make their money now. They want to, they want to be able to sell it at the end of 2021 or early 2022, sit out of the market for a year and come back in, and then just rinse and repeat that for the next 100 years. Every 4 years, you just do the same thing. I just simply think that markets don't act like that. I don't think that Bitcoin is going to be on some very specific schedule for the next 100 years. I mean, markets adapt to what's happening in the market, and I think we're going to see that play out this cycle. Okay, we're going to see that play out this cycle. So if this is the market cycle peak, which again I don't think it is, then it would at least be diminishing returns is true. If it's not the market cycle peak, and then we end up not peaking for the rest of the year, and then we start to move up in 2022, and we put in new all-time highs in, say, 2022, or even later in 2021, but we're not going to a market cycle peak, then we could say, well, lengthening cycles is true, but maybe diminishing returns is not true, because there's still a chance we could go to $300,000 by the end of the cycle. I think that $300,000 is a little bit too far-fetched, especially with the idea of diminishing returns, but that's where we are today. Okay, if this is the market cycle peak, which I don't think it is, that means diminishing returns was true. If it's not the market cycle peak, then we need to wait a while longer. And this is what I keep saying, time is on our side. I think Bitcoin just needs time. We're going to consolidate for a while. We're getting to the part of the chart where I think we should have been anyways, whether we just go sideways and hit it, whether we just spend a while consolidating, whether we have slightly lower prices. I don't really think it's that relevant to the idea that things will take longer to reach these higher valuations than a lot of people think that a lot of people think it might. So what if it does something like that? I mean, what if it goes up to, say, like a like a 30 to 40x, maybe like a 40x ROI from market cycle bottom? Note that the market cycle bottom for Bitcoin was around $3,100, so about a 40x from there would be around 120K. I think the price of Bitcoin could peak around 120 to 140K this market cycle, but I just don't think that's going to happen in 2021. If it happens in 2021, then I will be pleasantly surprised. Okay, I'll be pleasantly surprised. And I will be happy if it really is just as simple as buying your Bitcoin, right before the halving, and then just riding it for a couple of years and rinsing and repeating every 4 years from now and forever, until all the supply is out. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. So maybe we do something like this. I don't know if we're going to come down or not. Maybe we just go sideways. But I do ultimately see a market cycle peak somewhere out here rather than somewhere over here. Okay. I think this is a lot more likely and is in line with diminishing returns and lengthening cycles. Now, a lot of people say, well, you're extrapolating 3 data points, or maybe the trend between these 3 data points. So you're extrapolating a trend of 2 data points, right? That this is lengthening, diminishing, and diminishing. And that's one of the main criticisms for lengthening cycle theory and diminishing returns, is you're only extrapolating from a few data points. Well, again, that's what we do here. I dubiously extrapolate. I don't hide behind a rock. I say this is exactly what we're doing. We're dubiously extrapolating, and I would argue that if you're adamant that it's going to peak in 2021, then I might say, well, you're extrapolating from basically 1 data point, maybe 2, but really 1. I mean, the only reason I say maybe 2 is because some people might combine certain prior cycles that I wouldn't necessarily combine, but there is some bias to that, right? There's some subjectivity to that choice, and so why you could say, well, the people that think it might go to these, say, 300K in 2021, they're essentially just extrapolating 1 data point because they're assuming that this cycle is going to identically follow the last cycle, for it to go to 300K by 2021. Because again, if it goes to 100x from the market cycle bottom, we know the market cycle bottom was around $3,100, so 100x from there would put it at over $300,000. Therefore, if you're assuming it's going to go to $300,000 in 2021, you are actually extrapolating from one data point. So again, it's all dubious extrapolation. It's just how you're interpreting the data, and I'm just noting this trend rather than just saying, oh well, the last cycle did it, therefore this cycle has to do it too. I think it's more likely that this cycle is drawn out a bit longer, that the consolidation phases are longer than last cycle because this cycle will ultimately take longer to hit a market cycle peak, and it's split up into several legs rather than just one methodical move like we had last market cycle. Now, some of you prefer to measure it from the halving, and I can respect that. I mean, the halving is a big event for Bitcoin, so we might as well measure it from the halving as well. And again, this was a constant criticism of lengthening cycle theory too, is that, well, and diminishing returns is, well, how can you say it's going to take longer or the returns are going to diminish when we're literally just cutting through between the first and second cycle? Okay, I've always maintained for months and months and months that we will eventually get below this cycle in terms of cycle 2, and now you can see that that actually has transpired. So now cycle 3's ROI as measured from the halving has now come lower than as measured from the halving in cycle 2. So I think we're just sort of seeing it play out. So hey, maybe we see something like that. And again, you get these diminishing returns and lengthened cycles. So this is basically just an update. You know, I'm sure we probably put out a video similar to this maybe a week or two ago, but with all the recent market volatility, I think it merits somewhat frequent updates and frequent discussions so that we're staying on top of things. We see where we are in the cycle, and how far we could theoretically have to go. So I maintain my view has not changed. Okay, I think that we're going to have a cycle that lasts longer than most people expect. I think we're going to have consolidation phases, like right now, longer than most people expect. And that's why I keep saying I don't think we're going to have a V-shaped recovery. If we do get a rally, I would assume it's going to be a relief rally and not something that necessarily is going to be immediately sustained. Okay, if it is and we get back above the 20-week SMA, then we'll reevaluate. But I don't think that's a likely scenario. And until that happens, I think it makes a lot more sense to just assume that, hey, we're in for some consolidation for a while, and ultimately we hopefully will trend back up, but it's going to take some time in order for us to do that. Even when we were discussing Ethereum for the last several months, we said, expect a summer lull in the market. We've had 14 months where everything just went straight up. If you look at Ethereum's 90-day ROI, it tends to be the worst in the summer. Buying June, July, and August tends to give you the worst 90-day ROI on average as measured over the last 6 years. It gives you an ROI of 1, meaning some years it goes down, some years it goes up, but you're really not expecting anything crazy in the summer. So when we look at Bitcoin, again, this is my theory, and like any theory, it can be wrong. And when we talk about this stuff on Twitter and whatnot, it seems to be that there's a lot of people that, you're either adamantly in one camp or you're adamantly in another camp. At the end of the day, we all just want it to go up, but we're just sort of, wasting, I don't want to say wasting, but we're just sort of waiting to figure out exactly how it's going to make that move. And my contention is that, hey, this is the theory that I think makes the most sense. And if it turns out to be wrong, it turns out to be wrong. It's nothing against other theories. There's a lot of other popular theories out there, and we'll see which one actually stands the test of time. As we've always said, all models are wrong, some are useful. So there's going to be various assets to each model that maybe get some things right and some things wrong. Okay, so hopefully as we continue to navigate this market cycle, whether it ends up being a lengthened cycle or not, I just want us to have an open discussion as to things. I don't really want it to become this cult-like mentality where it's, hey, it's us against them. I think we're all on the same team. And that's something I really want to hammer down, that we are all on the same team. We all want, or I shouldn't say we all, because I'm sure there's some people out there that don't. But most of us want to see Bitcoin succeed, and I'm just trying to present a theory that is not often spoken about, but it's been one we've been following for the last several years. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the sale on the premium list. We'll have that running through the end of the week, so lock in the lower rate there if you want access to weekly reports and videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the Telegram chat room, the risk dashboard, the Into the Cryptoverse app, and more. You can lock in the lower rate. Check out the description below. Thank you guys for tuning in. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon to turn on your notifications, and I'll see you next time. Bye.